Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Pei Bet. Today's daf is sponsored by Avi Unitzman for finishing Masechet Shkalim. I've now closed the gap from Brachot to Shkalim, and may we be zochet to finishing the 14th cycle together. Today's daf is sponsored for Ufrash Lema to Pesha Etel Bat Sarah. Okay, we're going to get started with the bottom of our daf. I want to just correct one thing from yesterday's daf, the very end, Hamakalel B'Kosem. So there were two interpretations. Okay, one was Rav Yosef, who said we're going to come back to that one today. Rav Yosef had said that, okay, Rav Yosef had said, Yaket kosem et kosmo, that's in the kosem will curse his own kosem, meaning God, okay, so basically we're cursing God using a sorcerer, okay, but the second interpretation is Yakeh, this I didn't explain perfectly right, Yakeyu kosem lo v'lekono l'mapnyo. Okay, that interpretation is saying that he says it to a person. He curses another person and says, I'm cursing you, that the kosem will curse you, he, the sorcerer, and the sorcerer, and, right, the one who, in other words, the sorcerer's, creator, and the one who, right, is basically God in two words. That I interpreted right. The problem was I said, Yakeu, I thought it was cursing the kosem, but no, it's cursing a person, saying basically the sorcerer will curse you, and the sorcerer's creator and the one who gives him everything. So basically God and the kosem will curse some person. Okay, and then it's not cursing God, it's just using God's name to curse somebody else. That I just wanted to correct. Okay, now we're going to start at the end of the very end, right after that. Haboel Aramit. So the first part of today's daf, until we get to close to the end, is all going to be about different elements of this Boel Aramit, Kanaim Pogimbo, which is one who engages in sexual relations with another woman, with a non-Jewish woman. A person, a zealous person who sees, is allowed to kill. Now we're going to learn all sorts of qualifications of this. Where does this come from, by the way? It comes from Pinchas, right? The famous story. And we're going to get into many drashot of the Pinchas story, as the Gemara likes to do. They are going to elaborate and add all sorts of details that are missing in the text, some coming from difficulties in the text or things that are unclear in the text, and some just elaborated details of the story. So, Ba'mine Rav Kahana me Rav. So, the first question we're going to ask, Rav Kahana asked Rav the following question: Lo pagubo kanaim mai. Well, what happens if kanaim aren't pogimbo? Now, we're going to learn that kanaim pogimbo is if while they're in the act, somebody sees them and they're a zealot, and they say, "Oh, this can't be." They are allowed to kill them. But once the act is finished, they can't anymore. So then what happens? It doesn't really say that there's a punishment by the court. Okay, it seems like the zealot is acting alone, independent of the court. And we'll see that later as well. So what happens if not? What punishment do they get? So when Rav Kahana asked Rav this question, Inashi Rav Legamare, Rav forgot. He didn't remember what he learned about this. The next thing that happens, Rav Kahana has a dream. Okay, we don't know when, but he has a dream, and in his dream, somebody reads him a pasuk. This is very famous. This happens a lot in, not famous, but it's popular in Talmudic stories that people have somebody reading them a verse in a dream, and it's like a sign they're saying something. But Rav Kahana didn't understand what it meant, so what did he do? Okay, first of all, he hears the pasuk, like this pasuk. It's a pasuk in Malachi, chapter 2, verse 11. It's one of the Treasar of the 12 prophets. Bagda Yehuda v'Toivana Sabi Yisrael b'Yerushalayim. Okay, Judea has rebelled. Despicable things have been done in Israel and Jerusalem. Ki chilel Yehuda kodesh Hashem asher ahev, because Judea has disgraced the sanctity of God, which he loved. Ubaal bat el nechar, and slept with the daughter of an idol, which in general is a weird thing. What idols have daughters? We're going to get back to that later. So Ata Amrle. So Rav Kahana goes to Rav and says, "Hey, I heard this pasuk in a dream. Somebody read it to me. Hachi ekrayum. This is what they read to me. It kare Rav legamare. All of a sudden, Rav remembered, and he said, I remember the answer. Now, they didn't tell you the pasuk, which comes after that, which is the important pasuk for getting the answer. But first, we have to understand what this pasuk is referencing. And then we'll see the next pasuk, and that will give us our answer. Bagda Yudah, Judea has rebelled. That's idols. How do we know? Because we're going to see a different pasuk. They're going to quote a pasuk that connects one of the words in that pasuk with what we're looking for. So, Kenu Omer Bagadtem bi Beit Yisrael Nu Hashem. It says in a different pasuk that Bagda, okay, the Jewish people have rebelled against me, and there the context is idol worship. So therefore, this must be idol worship. So that's the first one. Toivana Sabi Yisrael v'Yerushalayim Shem Ishkav Zachor. This is homosexual relations, v'cheinu omer, and that's because the word toeva, despicable, comes up in relation to homosexual relations in the Torah. V'etzachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha toeva. Okay, there you see the word toeva, and toeva was there. It must be relating to that. Ki chilel Yehuda kodesh Hashem. Zozona, this is a prostitute, because we saw this pasuk not so long ago. Lo yeh kadesh b'bnei Israel, right? There shouldn't be a kadesh, which is a prostitute. Okay, so it must be prostitution. Uba'al bat el nechar zeh al hanochrit. Okay, or kutit, or whatever it says by you. Again, usually kutit is the censor changed it to some other word, but could be the original seems to be nochrit. So bat el nechar is someone who sleeps with a Gentile woman. Okay, so now we finally got to, this pasuk relates to our topic. How do we know what the punishment is? Well, the next pasuk, k'tiv batrei, after that it says, Yacharet Hashem la'ish asher yasena. Okay, God will cut off the person who does this. That already is our answer, but we're going to read the whole pasuk and explain the rest of the pasuk. So what do you see? Death by the hands of God. But the pasuk continues, and we'll explain what that means. Okay, God will cut off the person who does this, and Aaron Onah from the gods of Yaakov and Magish Minchal Hashem Tzvaot. So what does that mean? Well, in Tamid Chachamu, if the person who sins is a Tamid Chacham, which shouldn't be sinning in these ways, but once in a while you do have such a situation, Lo Yihiyelo Erba Chachamim V'oneh B'Talmidim. Okay, most people think this means he won't have a son. Okay, he'll be punished that his son will not be a Tamid Chacham, someone who will teach the people and someone who will answer the students' questions. Im Kohenhu, if he's a Kohen, lo yeh ben magish minchal Hashem tzvaot, then his son will not be able to do the work in the temple. Okay, these are punishments that if you're a Talmid Chacham or if you're Kohen, you get a specific punishment. Otherwise, it's just karet. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya. Okay, this is, you can do a search. I was looking this up on Shabbat, so I only have my book, which has all the Tanaim and Amoraim, and I couldn't find this person anywhere in the book. I didn't look on Google to see if he appears elsewhere, but I assume he doesn't appear very much in the Gemara. I was wondering if there was a connection to Elisha ben Avuya. I don't know, but I'm not sure. I assume not. But anyway, we're going to have two statements by Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya. So, kol ha'ba'al hanochrit ke'ilu mitchatein ba'avodah zarah. The first one connects to this pasuk. Dichtivu ba'al bat el nechal. Okay, let's just explain. If someone has relation with a Gentile woman, it's as if they're marrying idols. Okay, as if they kind of enter into a relationship with idols. How do we know this? Because it says, Uba'al bat el nechal, right? Sleeps with the daughter of an idol. V'chibat yeshlo le'el nechar. What, does an idol have a daughter? Right? We know idols are nothing. Of course, they don't have daughters. Ela zeh ha'ba'al hanochri. This must be talking about someone who engages in relations with a Gentile woman. It's as if he marries the idol. Okay. But now we have a second statement, which is seemingly really unconnected. But because Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya brought one statement, they brought one statement of his, now they bring another statement. V'amar Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya, katuv al gulgalto shel Yehoyakim zot va'od acheret. On the skull of Yehoyakim were written the words. Okay, remember Yehoyakim is one of the later kings of Judea, shortly before the destruction. And we're going to see soon a pasuk in Yirmiyahi about him. And from there, we're going to get to this story, okay? So on his skull said the words, this and another. So we don't know what that means yet. Skeno de Rabbi Preda, the grandfather of Rabbi Preda. Some people think that this is Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya himself. Okay, that Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya, Eshka Hahugul, or else the grandfather of Rabbi Preda, whoever this was, Eshka Hahugul Golta Davashadi B'Sharei Yerushalayim Vayakatuv Yilaveh Zot V'od Acheret. So we saw a skull. Now, I want you to understand. Yehoyakim was before the destruction of the first temple, right? And now we jump many generations later. We don't know exactly when he lived, but he was either a Tana or an Amora. We don't know exactly which one, but he was clearly living many, many, many generations later, okay, hundreds of years later. And he basically finds this skull in the courtyards of Jerusalem, outside the gates or by the gates of Jerusalem, and he found a skull that said on it Zot V'od Acheret. Kavra v'Hadran nevog. Kavra v'Hadran nevog. He buries it in the ground, and it emerges from the ground, and he buries it again, and it emerges from the ground. Amar, he said, I know whose skull this is. Hi, Golgotha Yehoyakim. How do I know this is Yehoyakim's skull? Dichtivbe, because it says about him in Yirmiyahi, Kurat Chamor Yikavel. He'll be buried like a donkey. Schov v'hashlech mehalel sharei Yerushalayim. It will be dragged and thrown right from the gates of Jerusalem, which means his skull will not be buried. Amar malkahu v'lav orach ara levazuya. But he says, this is a king's skull. It's really not appropriate. His skull is rolling around in the streets of Jerusalem. Shakla karcha b'shirai. So what did he do? He wrapped it in silk. V'ot ve'b'sifta, and he puts it in a chest. Okay, puts it in his house, but forgets to tell his wife what he does. So his wife comes. Ate debitu chazita. She sees this in the house. Nafkat amra lehu l'shivavate. Now what does she do? She goes to her neighbors, her friends. She says, "Could you believe I found this box in my house with a skull inside?" Okay, instead of asking her husband, she goes to her neighbors and she tells them what she sees. Amrela, they said to her, "Hi di'itata kamaitahi. This must be your husband's first wife. V'delo kaminashela. He doesn't want to forget her, And he says, "Oh, it must be the first wife's skull." Sugar, tila tanura uklata. So what does she do? She doesn't want the husband remembering his first wife, so she puts it in the furnace and she burns it, okay, in her oven or something, and she burns it, and the skull was burned. Ki'ata, when he comes back and he sees the skull burned, Amar, he says, now I understand why it said on the skull, this and another. In other words, not only was the skull not going to be buried properly, but the skull was in the end burned. Okay, so two terrible things happened to the skull of Yehoyakim. And interestingly, one was from way before, and the other one happened many, many generations later. Okay, the meaning of the story, I can't really tell you, I don't know, but an interesting story. Now we're back to our topic. Ki'ata, remember, we got here, just so you remember, because it was something else that Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya said. Ki'ata Rav Dimi. We're now going to have Rav Dimi and Ravin, both the Nechute, they were people that brought the Torah from Israel, and each of them have a bit of a different version about what the court in the time of the Hasmonean did. Okay, this is the time of the Hanukkah story, the Hasmonean, the famous ones. Beit Dino shel Ki'ata Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, he said, Beit Dino shel Hasmonai Gazru. The house of the Hasmonean, the kings of the Hasmonean kings, or the courts, made a decree. What was the issue? They didn't want people engaging in relations with Gentile women. So, right, they were worried about, the whole Hanukkah story is worried about assimilation, right? So what they do, they said, in the Torah, it says you can't marry them. It doesn't say you can't have relations with them. So they didn't want people, though, right? They didn't want anything going on. So what did they say? They said, listen, if you do this, habala goya, or ala nochlit, whatever language you have, chayav aleh mishum nashga. And nashga is Rashi Tevot. They love Rashi Tevot, abbreviations. Okay, nun nida. Okay, she's a nida. Now, generally, we don't view the blood of a Gentile woman as nida blood, but Rashi explains here, even though really it's not nida blood, he calls it dam be'ema, which means the blood of an animal is not considered nida. It's not impure, but mikomakom mi'us v'chilul l'kedushat Hashem. Okay, it's a disgrace to God if you do this. So they call it nida. Shin shifcha, engaging in a relationship with the maidservant. Now, even though not all Gentiles are maidservants, but they're saying we can put them all in that category because potentially they could be. Gimel, goya, engaging in a relationship with a Gentile woman, and, which can come from lo titchatein bam, don't marry them, so also don't engage in relations with them. And aleph, eshet ish. Well, if she's married, then you're also taking someone else's wife. Ki'ata Ravin amar, well, when Ravin came, he disagreed with the last point, and he says, nash gaz, okay? He switches the eshet ish to zona, prostitute, which, by the way, is only forbidden to a Kohen. A Kohen can't have relations with a prostitute. So, this doesn't mean any man can have relations with a prostitute. What they mean is if there was a woman who engaged in prostitution and slept with other men, right, that it's not forbidden for a man to marry her, okay? But what they're saying, if you're a Kohen is not allowed to marry a woman like that. So basically what they're saying is by you marrying a Gentile woman, we can assume that woman slept around, and therefore she's a zona, and therefore if you're a Kohen, it's a fourth, but not eshet ish. So again, nida shifcha goya zona, aval mishum ishu leit lehu. Why not ishud? Because he says in the Gentile culture, it wasn't like every woman was only with one man. So there is no such concept of eshet ish. You're not like disgracing this man because you slept with his wife, because his wife would have slept around with other people anyway while they were married. There's no such concept. And obviously the idach, the first opinion says, Nashayo vadai lo mifkarei. No, the men of Gentile cultures actually didn't let their wives sleep around with other men. So yeah, it is a problem of Eshedish. So they have this machloket. Is there a concept of Eshedish by Gentiles or not? Amar Rav Chisda. Okay, we're back now to the concept of Kanaim Pogimbo. We want to better understand this halacha. So again, we have a situation. Someone's engaging in relations. We learned already that it's only while they're engaged in the act. And it's a zealot. Now, why is it a zealot? Well, it's coming to teach you, again, this really comes from Pinchas, who is a zealot and basically killed Zimri when he was engaging in relation with Cosby. By the way, we talked about, I think I mentioned yesterday, this is only when they do it in public. Okay, when they're doing a public engaging in relations, then you're allowed to kill them while you see them in the act. It seems to be only in public, although we didn't really discuss that. The commentaries talk about that. Now, Amar Rav Chisda, Habali Malech Emorim Lo. What if you go to the court and you ask the court, listen, I see someone engaging in relations, am I allowed to kill them? The court will not tell you you're allowed to kill them. Okay, this makes it very interesting. We saw before Din Rodef, and we said when someone is trying to kill someone else, pursuing someone else, you're allowed to kill them, and you're kind of functioning like the court, right? We talked about all these elements that look like it was as if you're a messenger of the court. Kanaim Pogimbo, you are not a messenger of the court to the extent that if you ask the court will tell you you're not allowed to. It's only when you have this zealous feeling, oh my goodness, I can't let this go on, will allow you. But we're going to see it's very limited. Okay, so the first thing they're going to say is, right, if you ask the court and you almost like you hesitate and you say, well, should I not? That's not what we're talking about here. If you start hesitating, the court will not tell you you're allowed to do this. It's not under the jurisdiction of the court at all. You're not functioning as a messenger of the court. And to the extent that we're going to see we're going to take this even farther in a minute. So that's Rav Chisda, who's living in Babylonia. On the flip side, we have, or not the flip side, but on the other side of the globe, not the other side, but in the other main central area in Israel, each Marnami was said the exact same thing. Okay, also, if you ask the court, they will not tell you should do it. Below od ella, and not only that, but she'im peresh Zimri v'harag Pinchas neharag alav. If Zimri had stopped the act, if he saw Pinchas coming at him, and he separated himself from Cosby, and then Pinchas had killed him, Pinchas would be killed for that act. Okay? To the extent, right, you could only do it, here we see it inside, you could only do it at the moment that the act is going on. If the act is over, you can't kill them anymore. And Nehepach Zimri v'haragola Pinchas, this is the really radical one. If Zimri saw Pinchas coming at him, and he killed Pinchas, ein haragalav. Zimri would not be liable the death penalty. Why is that? Sharei rodefu. To the extent that we do not view Pinchas as a messenger of the court, therefore, he's basically viewed as a rodef. He's pursuing someone. And if someone's pursuing you, you're allowed to kill them. So if Zimri were to have turned around and killed Pinchas, he would not be liable at all. Okay, so basically, it's saying, do this all at your own risk, okay? Your own risk that, number one, only while they're in the act. And if, and if they stop the act before you kill them, you're basically going to get the death penalty. And if they kill you while they're in the process because they want to self-defense, they're actually exempt, so they can kill you. So it seems to be basically limiting this completely and saying, well, not completely, but almost completely, and sort of saying this is a dangerous thing to engage in. Okay, now we're going to get to the whole story of Pinchas. So Vayomer Moshe Shoftei Yisrael. So the first pasuk they're quoting, let's read the whole pasuk. Moshe said to the Shoftim, let's go back and give the background. There's Bilam, he tries to curse the Jewish people, right? Balak hires him to curse the Jewish people. He's unsuccessful, and then he suggests to them, listen, if you really want to get to them, right, send your women over, and they'll engage in sexual relations with your women. You'll be able to sway them that way. They'll worship Avodah Zarah. They'll follow your idols, the idols of the women, and that's the way to get to them. And in fact, what happens is, right, Zimri, the head of the tribe of Shimon, even though it's a little confusing because the head of the tribe of Shimon is Shlumiel ben Suri Shaddai. Yeah, Shlumiel ben Suri Shaddai. Not Zimri, so we're going to have to figure that out. And he engages a relation with Cosby, who is the daughter of the king. And in front of everybody, and Pinchas comes, stabs him, right? And there were 24,000 people killed in this plague. Okay, those are some of the details you need to know. And now we're going to go through, and as we're going to see, the Gemara is going to embellish and add a lot of details that are not mentioned Again, some may be coming from Sukkim, some not. So Moshe says to Shoftei Israel, Hirgu isha nashav hanitzmedim lebal por. So there's people worshiping idols. And Moshe basically says to people, take the law into your own hands, right? Everyone should go and kill whoever is worshiping Baal Peor. So he says to the Shoftim, to the judges, Halach shivto shel Shimon etzel Zimri ben Salu. So Shevet Shimon goes to their head of tribe. Amrulo, hein danin dinei nefashot v'ata yoshev v'shotek. Said, I don't get what's happening. They're coming to kill us all right now, and you're just sitting silently. You're our leader. Do something. Okay, so for whatever reason, it's not so clear why Zimri decides to do this. But the question is, what caused Zimri to go sleep with Cosby publicly? Well, it was a reaction because people said, you're doing nothing. So what did he do? He gets up. Masa amad v'kibetz esrim v'arba'a elef miYisrael. You could get this number where it's coming from. He gathered 24,000 people to go with him. Those are going to be the 24,000 people that die in the plague. MiYisrael v'halach etzel Cosby, and he goes to Cosby, and he says, Amar la hishamili, okay, or hishamali. What will you agree to engage in relations with me? Amralo, she says to him, Bat melechani, I'm the daughter of a king. V'chein tzivali avi, and this is what my father commanded me. Now you would have expected a father would command, don't have relations with other men. That's usually what the king tells his daughter. No, but since we know she wasn't great, so what did her father tell her? Lo tishami ela ligadol shabahem. If you're going to engage in relations with them, at least do it with, right? Only do it with the most important one. Zimri was not the most important. Who was the most important? Moshe. Okay, so basically she says, I'm not willing. Amrula afhin asishevetu. So the whole tribe said, listen, or the people who went, right? They said, what do you mean? He's the head of the tribe. Belod elashu gadomi menu, and he's even greater than Moshe. We know he's greater than Moshe. Shushini labeten v'ushlishi labeten, because Shimon, right? Zimri is the son of Shimon, who's number 2 in the family, and Moshe is the son of Levi, who's number 3 in the family. So you see that Zimri is greater than Moshe. That's what they try to tell her, and it obviously convinces her. And to fasabi blorita, so he grabs her by her hair. Ve'avia etzel Moshe, and she brings him into Moshe Rabbeinu. Amarlo, Ben Amram, zo asura muteret. So he goes to Moshe and he says, Ben Amram, son of Amram, is she permitted to me or is she forbidden? Obviously, Moshe's going to say forbidden. But before he even has a chance to speak, the Im Tomar Asura, he says to Moshe, if you think she's forbidden, Bat Yitro, mi tiralecha. Who permitted you to sleep with the daughter of Yitro? In other words, you're going to tell me I can't sleep with a Gentile woman? You yourself married a Gentile woman. So obviously, what happens to Moshe at this moment? He was a little humiliated. And nital mami menu halacha. We started our daf with Rav, who couldn't remember the halacha because he embarrassed Moshe in that way. Moshe couldn't remember the halacha. Now, why are they telling us this? Because they want to explain why Pinchas was the one who killed him and not Moshe Rabbeinu. You would have expected Moshe to get up and do it, but Moshe was so stunned by what Zimri had said to him that he basically couldn't function. He was silenced. He couldn't remember the halacha according to this, that he was supposed to kill Zimri. Ga'u kulam bebechiya. And that explains the following pasuk. Why everyone started crying. Everyone started crying because Moshe forgot the halacha. It's a tragic moment. And that's what it says in the pasuk there. Behema bochim petach ol moed. And the people are crying at the entrance to ol moed because Moshe didn't respond. Okay, because he forgot the halacha. And then uchtiv. So who does come? Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. So now we're going to learn we're going to darshan this whole pasuk, all the different parts. So let's just read through them. Pinchas first sees. We're going to have a big question. What did he see? We're going to have 3 opinions about that. Then it says, why does it have to say Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen? Why not just Pinchas ben Elazar? Why do we have to go all the way back to Aaron? Vayakom mitoch ha'edah. What does it mean? He got up from among the people. And then vayikach romach biyado, and he took a spear in his hand. So we're going to have to explain all of this. So now it says, Uchti vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ma ra'ah. What did he see? So Amar Rav. Rav said, Ra'ah ma'aser v'niskar halacha. He saw the action, right? He saw what was going on, and he remembered the halacha. Okay, he saw it. It doesn't mean he saw anything else that no one else saw. It's just the only thing that he did differently from everyone else. He remembered the halacha that kanayim pogim bo. Okay, the people standing by should take action. Amar lo, achi avi abba. So now he says to Moshe, achi avi abba lo kachli maditani b'riditcha mehar Sinai. So when he remembered the halacha, now it wasn't appropriate for him to go kill. So what did he do? He went to Moshe and he said, listen, Moshe, right, brother of the father of Avi Abba, right? You're the brother of my grandfather, okay, because my grandfather's Aaron, brother of my grandfather, Lokachli Maditani. Did you teach me this when we read Har Sinai? When you came down from Har Sinai, okay, this is trying to attribute this halacha to way back to Har Sinai. Haboel Arami Kanaim Pogimbo. So now he reminds Moshe of the halacha. So what would you expect to happen? You'd expect Moshe to go then and do it. But what does Moshe say to him? Amar lo, Karyana di igarta iu lehabe parvanka. We've seen this phrase before. It means the person who reads the letter, he is the one who's supposed to be the messenger. In other words, you remembered it, so you do it. Okay? And Moshe puts the responsibility in Pinchas's domain. And that's how we explain Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar. Shmuel has a different interpretation. Shmuel Amal, Ra'a she'en chokma ve'en tfuna ve'en etzah neged Hashem, which means Kol makom sheyesh chilul Hashem en chokim kabod l'Rav. This is explaining why Pinchas did it himself and not Moshe. And it's disrespectful to start doing something in front of Moshe. Well, there's en chokma en tfuna. That whole thing goes out the window when there's neged Hashem, when there's a chilul Hashem going on, and that's why he was able to do this and not have Moshe do it. Okay, according to the first version of Rav, it was that Moshe told him to do it because he's the one who remembered the halacha. But according to the second, it was just he had to act immediately because also remember, once he finished the act, he wouldn't be able to do it. Last explanation, Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Ra'a sheba malach v'yishchit ba'am. He saw there was a plague going on. The Malach HaMavet was coming and killing the people. And he realized he couldn't hesitate at all because the more he hesitated, the more people were going to be killed. Felt like if I kill him right now, that will end the plague. Because remember, he gathered all the 24,000 people. Those were all the people who died. So he wanted to stop the death. And that's why he did it immediately. So the first thing we're going to learn, you cannot bring weapons into the Beit Midrash. And that's why he got out first. Mitoch ha'idam. Mitoch ha'idam means from the Sanhedrin. He was in the Sanhedrin, which is this, their Beit Midrash. He came out of that. That's why it says Vayaka mitoch ha'idam, and then he took the spear in his hand. Because you can't have weapons in the Beit Midrash. Next. Now we're going to understand why he put it in his hand. What does it mean he took the spear in his hand? So, and how did he get into, the question is, if Zimri had all these people around him, how was Pinchas successful in getting through with his, they didn't have metal detectors, checking, do you have weapons, right? How did he sneak it in? So he must have snuck it in somehow. Shalat shenana v'yinicha ba'unkalo. He took the blade off the handle so that he could stick it in his cloak, right? Imagine a big sword. You can't hide that. But he separated it into two pieces, put the spear in his cloak or in his clothing, hid it. V'haya, turning out on a bed, nishan v'holecha maklo. And he took the handle of it and used it as a staff, like as a cane. When he got to the tribe of Shimon, Amal, now he tried to pretend he was going to be like one of them. He said, since when do you see that Shevet Levi is greater than Shevet Shimon? And what? Like, we're not holier than thou. You're engaged in these sexual relations with these women. Well, I'll do it also. Amru hanichulo They said, okay, let him in. He's not trying to infiltrate. They said he just wants to engage in all the bad deeds that we're doing. Let him in. Kitiru prushim et hadavar. And they said it must be the prushim, right? This is what they called the rabbis at the time of the Gemara and the time of the Mishnah, the prushim. The prushim, like Pinchas, are permitting what we're doing, right? They were so excited that he seemed to be one of them. So they let him in. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shishani simna asula Pinchas. Okay. Now Rabbi Yochanan says there were 6 miracles that happened to Pinchas, which allowed him to do what he did. Okay, that couldn't have happened were it not for these 6 miracles. Some people, there's a different version of this somewhere else, not in our Gemara. There's a different version, and I forget now where I saw it, but where there were 12 miracles that happened to Pinchas. This one says 6, Rabbi Yochanan. So what are they? Well, echad shayalo lezimri lefrosh v'leperesh. Zimri should have just separated himself from Cosby, and then Pinchas wouldn't have been able to kill him. Remember, that's what we just said. Pinchas would have been killed for it. So he should have done that, but he didn't. Echad shayalo ledaber v'lo diber. He should have just screamed for help. And he had all these people around him. They would have all killed Pinchas, but he didn't. Ve'echad shekivem b'zachruto shel isha b'nekvuta shel isha. Well, Pinchas specifically killed them in their genitals. Okay, because what did he want to show? He wanted to show this isn't that I'm angry at them or something. It's not like a personal vendetta. This is because of the act of sexual relations that they were engaged in, and therefore he killed them specifically there. And not only that, and he speared them right there, and then he held them up to everybody to see, like they didn't fall off the blade of the spear, so that he carried it out, basically showing everybody what he had done and why he had done it. And imagine it's not so easy to balance them on the spear. That was a miracle. And not only that, but try imagine walking out through a doorpost, right, carrying these two bodies that obviously was going to have to bend down to get through the doorpost. So a miracle happened, and an angel made the doorpost, much wider and taller, and he was able to get through. Ve'echad, and another thing that helped him, so that people didn't attack him, was the Bamal Ach v'Shchit Ba'am. Malachi came and started killing the people, which means they were all busy dealing with the death around them, and therefore didn't stop Pinchas or attack him on the way to do what he was doing. So now Pinchas is done, he kills them, and he goes to God. Now, what does he want? Remember, we said he wanted the Magefah to stop. That's why that was one of the explanations. All these people were dying, and he wanted it to stop. So he comes and he brings the bodies up to the heavens. Okay, again, this is a story. So he brings them up to heaven, and in front of God. And he goes with a complaint to God. And he says, because of this, these two people, what, you're going to kill 24,000 people? That seems a bit extreme. As it says on the Pasuk. There were 24,000 people who died. And that explains the Pasuk that says, again, some of these crazy explanations are coming from words in the Pasuk that don't make sense. Vayamod Pinchas vayipalel. It says, Vayamod Pinchas, he got up, vayipalel, v'ateratera magefa. Okay, this is a pasuk in Tehillim. The Pinchas got up, now yipalel sounds like vayitpalel, he prayed, and then the magefa ended. But they're going to say, Amar Rabbi Elazar, vayitpalel lo ne'amar. It doesn't say he prayed. It says, vayipalel. Now what vayipalel is more like he made a case with God. No. He made a claim against God, like, what are you doing? Okay, that's really what he did. Now, when he went up to Shemayim and said to God, he goes up to the heavens and says to God, what are you doing? Well, you can imagine, okay, just like when he went to Zimri, the question was, what did the people around try to do? And there was a miracle, and God made sure they didn't do anything. When he goes up to God, God has his own croonies around him, right? People that are supporting him. Who's that? Not people, but the angels. So, the angels wanted to get rid of Pinchas and say, what are you doing? You can't come to God with claims like this. Amar lahen, God said to them, Hanichu lo kanai ben kanaihu. Mashiv chema ben mashiv chemahu. Okay, he is the son, he is a zealot, the son of a zealot. Okay, who's that? Well, it comes from Shevet Levi. And Levi, if you remember, in the story of Shechem and Dinah, right, they were very angry about what Shechem did, and they wouldn't let it go. They were zealous about it. Shimon and Levi went. Right? It's interesting always that Shimon and Levi, here Shimon goes head to head with, Levi goes head to head with Shimon, but basically he's the son of a zealot, and he's acting in the same way that Levi did, meaning it's okay what he did. And he's Meshiv Chema ben Meshiv Chema, just like Aharon, he's descended from. Aharon, in the Korach story, if you remember, also people were dying, and Aharon stopped the whole Magefah by bringing the incense offering. So just like Aaron is the son, someone who basically is Meshiv Chema, he's able to move away, right, to calm the anger of God. Also, Pinchas is able to do that. Okay, so basically we have the angels who went up against him, but God supported him. Now we have the problem that the Shvatim start to mivazimoto. The tribe started to say, Ra'item ben puti zeh shepitem avi imo agalim la'avodah zarah. We saw this before. Remember that Elazar is his father, and Elazar married Bat Putiel. Now, Bat Putiel seems to be the daughter of Yitro. Okay, so he also descended. They say, what's he doing with these, just like before, where we had the, what about Moshe? Then we said to Moshe, here, the people started saying about Pinchas. He's the son of, right, his grandfather was Putiel, who was Yitro, Shepitem Avi Imo Agalim La'avodah Zarah. The father of his mother was worshiping idols, basically. So, V'harag Nasi Shevet Yisrael, and this guy killed a head of a tribe. Ba Katuv Yichaso. So then the pasuk comes, and this explains why, going back to that pasuk that we read, that we're still on, which is Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen. It's basically saying he has good yichus, he's a good person, and he's right. And that was to defend him against the Jews that were all upset with what he was doing. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Hagdem lo Shalom. Now we say, this also addresses, Why does he need shalom? He needs shalom because he got everybody angry. And basically, Moshe said, we're going to bring peace between, God said to Moshe, make sure to bring peace between him and the nation. And that's Shneimar, Lachen Amor, Hineni Noten Lo Et Briti Shalom. I'm going to give him my covenant of peace. Uruya Kapara Zo Shtem Chaperet V'Holechet Leolam. Okay, and this atonement will be forever. He'll always be able to make peace with, the people will make peace with him. Okay, so that's our story of Pinchas. Again, a very elaborate version of the story. We're going to have more elaborations now about how bad what Zimri did was, and we're going to have very exaggerated stories here. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav, my dechtiv zerzir motnai motayish umelech alkum imo. Okay, this is what is it? A greyhound, and here, let me get the exact translation of this pasuk. Second. Okay, here. The thigh-belted greyhound or the he-goat and the king against whom none can rise. That's al-kum. Al-kum means they cannot rise against him. Okay, so now they're going to darshan the word zarzir. They're going to go to the gematria of the word. Okay, so we're now going to say, okay, this is a pasuk from Mishlei. Okay, and they're going to connect this to the story. Arba me'ot ve'esrim va'arba bi'ilot. Okay, 424 actions of sexual intercourse, basically. Zimri had ba'aloto rasha'uto ayom. Zimri did on that day. Okay, a bit extreme here. That's the zarzir. It's the gematria of zarzir. Bimtilo Pinchas ach tashash kocho. The question is, why didn't Pinchas kill him before that? Okay, first of all, you would have assumed he didn't have a lot of time, right? Because he had to do it before he finished. But now we see he had tons of time. And he even waited way too long. The question is, why did 24,000 people die in the meantime? Well, he waited until he got weaker. He wanted to wait until he engaged in sexual relations, so much so that he was tired. And then he wouldn't be able to stand up against him. V'hu no yodea, but what's the second part of the pasuk? Melech al kumimo, the king against whom no one can rise, was with him. So he didn't know shemelech al kumimo, that God was on his side, and he should have killed him earlier, right? And now we're actually giving a critique on Pinchas, that he should have killed him earlier. Besides that, we were a little critical of him before. What was he doing going against God? But there, at least God protected him. But here we're really saying he should have killed him earlier, and then less people would have gotten killed. But Manitatan in a bright, it said Shishim, there were 60, only 60 times, not 424. He engaged in intercourse with her until his semen was already so diluted that it wasn't really, okay, there's different interpretations about this muzeret is, but we'll go with diluted, that it wasn't strong anymore. And she was like a what do you call it, an arugal, like where you plant flowers, full of water, like drenched in water, basically drenched in semen. Rav Kahana, Umoshava Beit Se'ah, the area where she was sitting, maybe even there was water logged, like semen logged, was a Beit Se'ah, which is a very, like it's the size of a field. Okay, these are just exaggerated terms about what had happened here. Tana Rav Yosef Kever Shalama, her kever, which is really, it's the way that rabbis talked about the womb of the uterus of the woman was 1 cubit wide. Okay, maybe it was saying that it was easy for him to have relations. I don't know exactly what they're trying to say here, but very exaggerated statements about their relations. Amar of Shesha lo Kazbi Shma. By the way, her name wasn't really Kazbi. We're going to see also his name wasn't Zimri. Ela Shvilnai bat Tzur Shma. She was Shvilnai, the daughter of Tzur. Okay, now Bilamani Krashma Kazbi. Okay, we're going to see later that Shvilnai was a name that they used on the street for prostitute. Like Shvilnai was like the prostitute name, and that's why they're saying she was like the classic prostitute, okay, or like the paradigm prostitute, I guess would be a better way to say it. But they called her Kazbi. Why? She's Baba Avuya, because she disappointed her father. Because remember what her father said? Only the most important, and she didn't. She went with, right? She was convinced that he was important, but he really wasn't. Davar acher, Kazbi shamra lavia kosbi amzeh. Slaughter through me this nation. Okay, kosbi is to slaughter. So that's maybe another interpretation of Kazbi. And now they're going back to the Shvilnai. This is what people say on the street. Ben kane l'urbe, between the reeds, Shvilnai my bai. What's Shvilnai, the prostitute, doing hiding between the reeds? Because that's where she hides, right, to seduce men there. Bahade kalpe de kane Shvilnai my bai. What is Shvilnai doing between the like the broken pieces of the reeds, or the peels of the reeds? Gaftali ima. and she basically disgraces her mother's name. She makes her mother into a prostitute because people call her prostitute, daughter of prostitute. Okay, and these are just showing you that Shvilnai is the name of like the paradigm prostitute, and that obviously is Cosby, is what they're saying. And it wasn't, her real name wasn't Cosby, that was her, her name they gave her. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chamisha Shemot Yesh Lo. Now we're going to get to Zimri. He had 5 names. Zimri, Uben Salu, Veshaul, Uben Aknani, Ushlumiel ben Surishadai. Zimri, Al Shanasa Kebeta Muzeret. Now they're doing, right, Zimri and Muzeret. It's different order of the letters, but it's got the same letters, okay? And therefore they go back to, well, his semen was so diluted because of all the times he had relations with her. Ben Salu, Al Sli Avonot Shel Mishpachto. He brought, let me just see the exact translation of this word. There's one place in this book, but he brought upon the, second, right, Sicily, he evoked the sins of his family, they say. Okay, there's some people say it means he lifted or he raised, he publicized the sins for everyone to see. Okay, there's a very famous salu, which is in Echa, Hamasulaim Bapaz. It's like they were all, covered in their sins. Shaul, Ashishil Atzmo Lidvar Vera, he kind of lent himself to doing bad deeds. Ben Kanani, Al Shasamasek Kanan. We talked not so long ago about what Kanan did with the sons, right? Remember, Kanan gets punished for it, but it was really Ham who revealed the Erev of his father, of Noach. Umashmo, what's his real name? Shlomiel ben Surishadai Shmo. Well, that you see in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, right? That he was the Nasi of Shevet Shimon. Kohen, okay, that's the end of Kanaan Pogembo. Now we're going to go to the next sugya, which is Kohen Sheshimesh Betuma. Now in our Mishnah, it said a Kohen Sheshimesh Betuma. What do? Kohen comes into the temple and starts working while he's impure. The young Kohanim go and kill him. So, Ba'amine Rav Acha Bar Huna me Rav Sheshet. Kohen Sheshimesh Betuma Chayav Mitabidei Shamayim or En Chayav Mitabidei Shamayim. So we just asked the question. Forget about the little kids killing him, but the young Kohanim. But say basically, if a Kohen goes into the temple and works while he's impure, does he get the death penalty or not? So Sheshet says, you could see from our Mishnah, Amalei Tanitua. Now, we're going to see that taking it from our Mishnah could actually go both ways, because Rav Sheshet is going to prove one thing from our Mishnah, and then Rav Acha asked the question to say, what do you mean? I could prove the opposite from our Mishnah. Tanitua, look in our Mishnah. Kohen Sheshimesh Betuma, Ein Chav HaKohanim Mevi'im Oto LeBeit Din, right? They don't bring him to court. Remember that weird thing that the young Kohanim go out and they smack him with wood pieces, and they knock his brains out. Here comes Rav Sheshet's proof. If you think that he's killed by the hands of God, we should leave him to be killed by God. Now, why should we let the Perchei Kuna take the law into their own hands if God is going to punish him? So it must be he's not punished in the hands of God. To which Rav Acha says back to him, Elamai, Eino Chayav. Wait a minute. You think he's not liable to get killed by God? Mi kamidi de Rahmana Patre v'ananikom v'nichtale. What kind of case do you have that God doesn't think you should get punished and we can go kill them? Right? No way. It would be the opposite, just like we saw with Boel Harami. Kanaim pogim bo, but if not, God will kill it, right? They'll get killed by the hands of God. Must be this guy's deserving of death. Otherwise, why would we allow the young Kohanim to go out and kill him? Villo. So now the Gemara says, what do you mean? Back to counter Rav Acha. First of all, it's interesting. Rav Acha asked the question, and Rav Acha kind of, after Rosh Hashanah brings his answer, Rav Acha says, oh, no, you're wrong. I would say the opposite from what you said. Villo, what do you mean? We have cases where we could kill someone even though they're not liable to the death penalty, like Mishal Shana. Going back to all the sugyas we just learned. Right? Someone does lashes, which lashes usually doesn't mean you're liable to the death penalty. It's just you did some sort of negative commandment in the Torah, and you did it twice. They already put you in a kippah and let you die. Right? The Torah doesn't think you're liable to the death penalty, and yet you're going to get the death penalty. So saying, no, that's not a proof, because remember, Hamar Rabbi Yirmiyahi, Amar Rish Lakish, we already explained this. Rabbi Yirmiyahi said in the name of Rish Lakish, no, they only do it in malkot that are associated with karet. Remember, you did something that's karet. You don't get punished by the hands of man in this world, but you do get lashes, right? And then when you get the lashes, usually it atones. But if you do it continually, then you really are liable to the death penalty. And again, that seems to be proving Rav Acha, who's basically saying there must be the person gets the death penalty by the hands of God. Otherwise, how would we be allowed to let the young Kohanim kill? We're going to go through now all the cases in the Mishnah and do the same thing to them. What about Gonevet HaKasva? You steal Klei Sharet, what? You get the death penalty by the hand, you're liable death in the hands of God. And if not, then how are we letting you kill them? So Hamar Rav Yehuda b'Klei Sharet Askina. Remember, Rav Yehuda said these are Klei Sharet, and a remiza, and there's a remez in the Torah, Lo Yavo L'Rot Kevalat HaKodesh V'Meitu. You're not allowed to, right, swallow up, which they understand to mean stealing, and if you do, you'll die. Okay, so yeah, there is death associated with it. What about one who curses God? Well, Hatani Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef explained, Kosmo. That's when someone curses God using the name of a sorcerer. So that's like, it's like you're cursing God. And therefore you would be liable to the death penalty, and that's why we can kill you. What about the Bo'el Aramit, who says you're liable to the death penalty? We started our daf with that. Rav Kahana b'chelme v'itkre Rav legamare. Remember? Rav Kahana forgot this good review. Rav Kahana forgot and then he saw this pasuk. I'm sorry. Rav forgot. Rav Kahana found the pasuk, heard the pasuk in the dream, told it to Rav, and Rav remembered. Oh yeah, you get karet. So basically, Rav Acha asked Rav Sheshet this question. Rav Sheshet answered, "Oh, our Mishnah proves obviously you're not liable to the death penalty." To which Rav Acha said, "What do you mean? All the more so you should be liable to the death penalty." We just went through all the cases in the Mishnah and showed that all those people are actually liable to the death penalty in the hands of God, and not death penalty by the court. But yes, death by the hands of God, and that's why we're allowed to take the law into our own hands. Again, we're getting back to this. How on earth are we allowed to kill somebody in this kind of way outside of the law, so to speak? And they're basically saying in all these cases, the person is really not considered alive because they're liable to death in the hands of God. We're going to get to an ATB tomorrow, and we'll start from there tomorrow's daf. So for today, we'll stop here. We're just going to review. We have all our situations of, we started with the Bo'el Aramit and the whole thing of, what happens, what punishment do they get, which we saw Rav was then reminded. Then we had we got off on the tangent of Rabbi Chiya bar Avuya, the darshan that pasuk also in a different way, and then had that other thing about the skull of Yehoyakim. From there, we got to the Gzeira of the Beit Hasmonean. They basically said you cannot be Bo'el Aramit if you are, a non-Jewish woman. You're liable for many, many sins, and a bit of a machlok at what that was. From there, we got to, all the details about when you can be Bo'el Aramit, and from there we got into the whole Pinchas story and elaborated on that, and then we went to this Kohen Shemesh B'tumah. Is he liable to death penalty or not? And we're in the middle of that discussion, which we'll get back to tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day and a Shavua Tov and B'sorot Tovot.